Jamira, Burley, and I'm super excited for this panel because oftentimes those who are talking about the solutions for change, particularly within the criminal justice system, particularly within human rights violations that are happening, not just here in the US, but around the world, those who are mostly impacted are rarely at the table when decisions about them are being made. And I think this is a great opportunity to help center ourselves around who are those who have been directly impacted. What are the insight they can give us regarding their direct experience and stories, having been a participant and oftentimes a victim of the systems? And how can we help to use those stories to contextualize real solutions for change to improve the conditions of our justice system, but also to improve the conditions of our world? With that being said, I would now like to introduce our illustrious panel who are going to help answer some questions for us to help guide us in this discussion and provide us some unique insight. And so shout out to them already for joining us in this, this panel. Each of you can feel free to turn on your cameras. I wanna first take this opportunity, and as you see, their names and titles, but oftentimes titles rarely tell the full story of those who are doing the work. And so I would love to start off and have each of our panelists introduce themselves and also take a moment to, center us, right? Because having watched as someone who has been directly impacted by the criminal justice system, I watched as 12 out of my 13 brothers move through the criminal justice system. I would love for each of our panelists, again, to introduce themselves and also to talk about what propelled them to take their personal experiences and use it as a driving force to improve the conditions of our systems, but also to help to provide contextualization for what are the small and large scale implications or impacts of mass incarceration. And I would love to start with Ali.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? Obviously, I'm Ali Niaz. I'm from an organization called BPureSounds. I'm the founder and main principal of the organization. And we're into developing IP content that's music related. So that's from artists to TV programs and uplifting them through our major partners. And myself, obviously, have been through the justice system in the past in my journey. And I feel there's so much that can happen with people that have been through the justice system speaking at the table, like you mentioned in your intro. So yeah, I'm glad to be here and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Ash?
Thanks for having us, everyone. And Jamira, thanks for the introduction. I work at Publicis Sapient as their global director of communications, but as Jamira said, that's not really why I'm here. And before that, I had a long career in politics, both in the UK and the US, working for the likes of Tony Blair and most recently Joe Biden and Boris Johnson. And I'm sorry about that one. But before all of that, I was incarcerated at 17. And I had my own run-in with the justice system because of the environment I was in. And, the justice system doesn't offer alternatives to prison, and they just look away, and they don't really offer programs to help you. And it was people reaching out and actually personally helping me and my family, and then a mentor that led me onto the career I had before. So I'm excited to talk about the second chance I was given, but also the second chances we give people who go through the justice system and what we can do to take down the current system as it stands.
Thank you, Ash. Michelle?
So I am Michelle Soroco with an organization called Televerde, which is a 25-year-old business-to-business sales and marketing agency that's been providing women in prison with jobs and training and education while they're incarcerated and preparing them for transition back into the community and into meaningful careers. I've been with the company 22 years. I started with them while I was serving a 7-year sentence here in Arizona. And I recognized it as the opportunity for me to actually rebuild my life. And I've stayed with the company and committed to growing the organization so that more incarcerated women could have the same opportunity as me. And most recently this year, I took on the role of executive director for our newly created Televerde Foundation, which was created in order to really take what we've learned over 25 years of providing incarcerated women with opportunities and education, but replicating that to be able to provide those opportunities to more people on a broader scale than just what we were able to do from our for-profit business.
Thank you, Michelle. Catherine?
My name is Katherine Jones with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. I was 13 years old when I was charged as an adult with murder. I went into the adult penal system and was stripped of all of the labels that I should have had of child and daughter and sister, and it was replaced with super predator and animal and felon and inmate. And after serving my time and doing everything I can to prepare for reentry, I came home only to realize that those labels followed me, and it affected every aspect of my life, from housing to employment. And so I became an ICANN member with the incarcerated children I've seen at work, and was surrounded by people just like me who grew up in prison and came home as adults, and seeing, you know, just how awesome and amazing all of us were, and wanted to be instrumental and on the front lines of changing the narrative of people that were directly impacted by the system, and showing who we were and that we weren't a product of just the mistakes that we made when we were younger, that we were more than that.
Thank you, Katherine. Marcus?
What's up, everybody? I'm super pumped to be able to be here. Like, you guys are like rock stars, so I'm super excited.
You had a lot of coffee, huh?
Yeah. You know, I jumped out. This is me. This is what I do. I wake up like this. I'm Marcus Bullock. I'm the CEO and founder of Flikshop. We built the technology that keeps families connected to their incarcerated loved ones. We started with a mobile app, take a picture, add some quick text, press send. We take that picture and text and print it on a real tangible postcard. We ship it to any person in any prison, anywhere in the country, connecting families in incredible ways. And I'm super pumped about that. I went to prison as a kid. I went to prison when I was 15 years old for carjacking a man in a shopping mall parking lot. And when I got there, like, I was mad depressed. My mom saw that I was becoming hopeless, and she wanted to be able to make sure that she could send me like these hugs through these photos and letters. And she made a promise to me in the prison visiting room to write me a letter or send me a picture every single day for the remaining 6 years of my sentence after I fell into that depression at year 2. It saved my life, preparing me for the world that I was going to be entering in when I came home in 2004. So when I came home, I really wanted to find a way to help connect families the same way that my mom did for me. And we started off with this tech. So I'm super excited to be able to be a part of that and to join this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marcus. And I can talk to Marcus like that because I know him. But hopefully by the end of this panel, you'll know all of the panelists, and hopefully their stories will help to drive you to create change. You know, I don't believe in storytelling for the sake of trauma or the sake of shock effect. I really hope that stories can help us to find solution-driven dialogue that will move to actual action. With that being said, I want all of our panelists to, you know, shake it off, because now we're gonna get real. We've already got through the hard part, sharing parts of our story, which oftentimes can seem a little overwhelming. But I wanna go to Katherine and Ali, because I think one of the biggest issues that I've always grappled with, especially when I'm talking to both domestic and international audiences, is that we know that there are many issues impacting our world, right? And oftentimes those issues transcend borders and culture and religion. But when we think about mass incarceration, oftentimes the U.S. is kind of, you know, ahead of the pack. We're leading, folks. Unfortunately enough, we're number one in many categories regarding mass incarceration. And oftentimes, you know, folks can think it's because Americans are we more inherently violent? You know, Philly fans maybe, but for the most part, I don't think Americans are more inherently violent. And so I'm curious for you, is it accurate to believe that Americans are somehow more violent or commit more crime, or is there something more happening with our criminal justice system that folks are being unwilling to talk about? And we can start with Ali.
For me personally, obviously, I can only speak from a UK perspective, and obviously been through the criminal justice system myself, and been in set up organizations that's all about social enterprise and reducing the risk of reoffending. I can only say it's not just America that's mass incarceration. It's just that America's so big, so it may seem like that. I think in the UK, it's pretty much the same thing. We have people, the reoffending rate is so high. So many young people are consistently going into prison due to because they're a product of their environment, and that is really because of lack of resources. Mm-hmm. And even Ash mentioned in his introduction, when he was 17, he ended up getting incarcerated, and people supported him. And I think in the UK, there needs to be a lot more support systems that need to be put in place, practical, tangible support systems that have direct impact on the youth from the beginning. So prevention is even in place, so we can stop this mass incarceration aspect, even in the UK. So yeah, that's what I think.
No, that was a really great point. Thank you. Katherine?
Jamira, I'm going to be very honest. Mass incarceration in the United States is not an indicator of personal characteristics or even rates of crime, but is a product of and a driver of systemic racism in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to throw that out there with stats to support it. The U.S. is the only country that will sentence a child to death by incarceration. Black children are incarcerated and sentenced to death by incarceration at a per capita rate 10 times that of white youth. 80% of all of those serving juvenile life without parole sentences are children of color. It's an intentional strategy to value and diminish Black lives, to further cripple their economies and weaken the political power of communities of color. The incarceration of children, but particularly Black children, ensures that the children and their families do not have equitable opportunities to thrive in America. And if someone is incarcerated as a child, as I was at 13, and you're released back into society way into adulthood as 30, obviously you were robbed of the opportunity to gain the skills that you needed in order to be successful and to thrive. And that affects your generations to come, that inhibits you from creating generational wealth, because most people are retired at 40 and you're just starting your life at 40. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's like a cycle of dehumanization and oppression and poverty that needs to be broken. And that's a systemic system and of the generational results.
No, I really appreciate you and Ali sharing that, Katherine, because I think what both of you kind of mentioned is, one, we have societies in which doesn't value people, particularly people that are different than those who are the vast majority in power. And also we have a system that uses different indicators to oppress those minorities, whether it's in the US thinking about oppressing those who are minority communities, those who have already been pushed to the margins. And then in the UK, thinking about those who lack resources and recourses, who don't have money to be able to fight back against the system. It speaks off, I think, it leads us right into our next question with this, which is this idea of, mass incarceration, when we think about violence, when we think about crime, is oftentimes a reflection of much deeper systematic problems within our community. And I would be curious to know, and we'll start with Marcus, what do you think is important for people to understand what's wrong with the criminal justice system and its intersectionality with other issues that we haven't fully addressed as a society?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question. Thank you for giving me the hard question.
I only have loaded questions.
I live in the business space, and I stay in this lane because it's interesting how much how me as an entrepreneur has transferred my expertise from that community now over into the advocacy space and helping others understand what humanity really looks like. Like at the end of the day, I'm like, yo, look, I'm a person, I'm a man, and I was an entrepreneur before I went into prison. When I came home, I think that the business community has a responsibility to be able to make sure that we not only communicate that, but what it looks like, when you see other successes. You can't be what you can't see. So people in prison need to, be able to see that, there are major success stories out, that are coming home from the world, but also in the business community, the political space, in the advocacy rings, you need to be able to see these amazing success stories like Katherine and Ashish. Because I think that when that happens, we reach that sense, that intersectionality of real, of risk, innovation, advocacy, and all of the community begins to change and evolve. Because at the end of the day, the stories like these are going to change the dinner table conversations. The dinner table conversations are going to change policy. And that's what I'm most optimistic about.
That's the FBI basically trying to shut us down. Michelle, I'm curious from your perspective, have you seen and have you witnessed in your own experience how oftentimes mass incarceration is used as a blinder to block what is really happening in our communities or stop the real progress that's happening in our communities?
When I think about mass incarceration, one of the things that I really believe is that we've been using it as a way to deal with problems that we don't want to deal with or we don't know how to deal with, right? So, for example, 86% of people have a need for substance abuse treatment at the time of their incarceration. People who are homeless are 11 times more likely to become incarcerated. And 65% of people who are incarcerated have at some point in their life been told that they have some sort of mental health issue. So we're essentially taking problems that we don't know how to deal with, and we're just simply warehousing them. And so we have to start to recognize those problems and those issues. It's much like Katherine was talking about, the systemic race issues that are also a part of what's going on, right? We're warehousing people because we don't know how to deal with the issues. And so it's time for us to actually say, okay, we have to find solutions for these bigger problems, and those solutions should not be incarceration. We have to figure out how, when we do send someone to prison, that while they're there, what happens to them enables them to come out as a better human being with a better opportunity for a better life, rather than condemning them to a lifetime of being marginalized. I mean, people who have been incarcerated are really one of the most marginalized populations in our country today.
No, that's such a great point. And it reminds me of, if you ever read the book Utopia, there's a quote by Thomas More that says, you know, if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners to be corrupt since their infancy, and then punish them for the crimes for which their first-rate education disposed them, what is to be expected is that you make criminals and then punish them. And so it's the idea in which everyday folks, those who are incarcerated, look like all of us and are there because our society has cultivated that environment and not actually created a space for us to heal them before we just throw them away into a system, and eventually they have to get back out into the community. Ash, I'm curious from your perspective, what have you seen, or what are the issues that you've seen oftentimes criminal justice has been a blinder for or a blocker for, and what are ways in which we can help to address those concerns?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think obviously all these questions have a thread. I mean, it's a human rights catastrophe, right? Mm-hmm. So we have 5% of the world's prison population. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the prison population, which is about the same numbers as COVID, if anyone's interested as well, which is not great. And this is in the so-called land of the free. And we're wasting genius. We're wasting people who could cure cancer, who could fix irrigation problems in California right now with water, and putting us on Mars. And we need a bit of solidarity. We need people to recognize you can't spend $80 billion a year on making things worse and expect to have better society after that. And this is all founded, basically, you asked the question earlier on about violence. Our society was founded on violence. Yeah, people asked if America is more violent. We killed all the natives when we arrived, when settlers arrived. We enslaved a whole race of people, and we enacted things in our constitution that allow for slavery to continue today. The 13th Amendment, Ava DuVernay's amazing documentary, which I recommend all people watch now, because it basically gave a loophole for slavery to continue in today's environment. It allowed us to do that when they were guilty of a crime. And let's just not be away from the bush. Our prison industrial complex and our police system was born from that. They were there to create it on slavery, and they enforce slavery today. And the reason I say that is because they have two systems. You know, if you're not the right skin color, if you don't have the money, when you look at our president, if you don't live at the right zip code, you'll never see a police officer if you live in all the right parts. But if you don't, you will be oppressed by the police, you'll be harassed by the police, you'll be over-supervised, and our values are wrong today. Our values aren't about our society, they're about this capitalist machine that enslaves lots of people in this country right now.
On that note, can we just do a moment of silence? I really appreciate, Ash, for you laying that out, because I think you're right. It's this idea of like, we can't find solutions unless we're willing to address how these systems came to be, the historical context that allow these systems to operate, and then also what are the harms that we've already done to past generations, as Katherine mentioned.
And if you look at the Black experience in America, I'm not Black, I immigrated here, right? It's contradictory. If you are coming from abroad, you celebrate Black men and women, Dr. King, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, James Baldwin, Harriet Tubman. At the same time, the vast majority of Black people and Black men are disproportionately incarcerated, over-policed, over-supervised, like I mentioned, pushed out of employment, pushed out of school, and pushed into the prison system. Black women are also the largest educated segment in our society, and yet they earn less. And why is that? If we can't address the violence and the racism, we can't address the prison industrial complex and real criminal justice reform.
That's so true. And I have to say, I know for a lot of folks who are listening in, with all the information you're providing for them, they're probably like, this seems overwhelming, right? This seems like such a big project, such a big system or institutions to reform, to break down, in my opinion, to burn down. And I think for those who are watching, I think there's so many different aspects to help us move closer to a fair, just, and comprehensive criminal justice system. Based on your experiences and expertise, what should be the goalpost, right? Because it can't just be reducing the prison population. And what will help us get closer to the just, fair, and comprehensive criminal justice system, or a comprehensive society that doesn't see mass incarceration or doesn't see the prisons as the solution for change? Michelle, if we can start with you.
Well, I think the real opportunity is how we provide people who have been incarcerated with opportunities to rejoin the community and participate in a life of prosperity. And so from a business standpoint, the number one thing that businesses need to do is include this population in your diversity and inclusion strategies, and look at how do we proactively provide training and jobs and opportunities for people who have a criminal record or who have been incarcerated, because it's through that we will put an end to the recidivism, because people have an opportunity to be successful, and then they become role models for their children and for their families, and it creates generational change. And really will have a long-term impact on the mass incarceration. I mean, we have to stop. I think about everything from a sales and marketing standpoint, right? We have to stop what's going in at the top of the funnel, but we also have to treat what's in the funnel, right? We have to nurture them. We have to educate them. And then when they're coming out at the bottom of the funnel, we have to provide them with real opportunities to be successful. And so if we look at it like a business problem and apply business thinking to it, then we can really make a huge impact.
Hope you hear that. That's code word for business leaders. Start writing down, taking notes. Ali?
Yeah, for me, I think it's very much similar to what Katherine's saying. It's about creating those opportunities and having this cycle of change occurring. And that can only happen once we start treating what's in the funnel. It's exactly that. Let's start treating what the real issues are, the core problems that's relating to this stuff happening regularly, and consciously try to figure out what each need is. Because I don't think the needs are, it's not a training booklet. I think the needs are bespoke to different people's environments, different individuals. And I think if we could start to hone into that and figure out what the needs are and figure out the solutions, and then break down this regular cycle of people being mass incarcerated, create opportunities, and then that will allow for change in your own home. That's like Katherine, like Michelle said, it's like your own home. You sit down, you start having a change, your children see that. It's a cycle that will continue generational change.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer the hardest conversations we can have are the ones at the dinner table with people who we share blood with. Katherine, you work with some of the most marginalized, who I consider the most vulnerable. I mean, my passion is always young people, some of the most brilliant people in the world. I'm curious for you, what are the avenues, what are the ways in which that we can, stop looking at this problem as so massive and start finding opportunities to be a part of the solution, especially when you think about children and youth?
Yes, thank you so much, Jamira. You see, I cut my mic off and I said, I just have to jump in here, because so often we find that when they talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not true diversity and inclusion. It's typically those that have nonviolent crimes or drug offenses, and very often this is children that have felony records, or people, children that have violent crimes. And that's in order for there to be true change and true diversity and true inclusion, those that are most oppressed and most marginalized have to be included in that. When I have experience looking for employment or houses, I've been the best interview. Some of these, they were like, your interview skills are amazing, and it was a direct hire. And as soon as they seen a background check that had homicide or murder in it, it was an automatic no-go, because of how society looks at those labels without looking at the background, without looking at my age or the circumstances of the crime. It's just all summed into violent offenders, and they're the most marginalized, oppressed group of people that are directly impacted.
Thank you for that. You know, Marcus, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention, we know the vast majority of folks who are incarcerated are Black men. And I'm curious, for your perspective, is there a possibility of a fair, free, and comprehensive justice system that protects the lives of Black and brown men?
I mean, I'm optimistic, right? I mean, I believe that it's possible. I think that, you know, going back to the root, I mean, Ashish hit the nail on the head. Prisons and the corrections industry as a whole, they've been profiting off of Black and brown bodies for over 100 years, dating back to the mid 1850s. I mean, even the correction officials and local governments, when they realized they could profit off of labor that was forced upon these Black and brown men and women, just as they did with slavery, like Ashish alluded to, it was interesting. And even in the 1980s, when it became a more lucrative space, when real estate investment companies got into the game, now, you know, the interesting thing that happened was that while they never had the goal of rehabilitation in mind when they jumped in, today, most of these business owners or politicians who make the decisions about the millions of people in those sales or the businesses that supply the industry seemingly also don't have these people in mind. And this is one of the reasons why companies like Flikshop and others are important, because we want to ensure that not only we're helping to keep families connected while incarcerated, but we're building the technologies that will allow us to democratize communications to be able to help the family connectivity, which we all know is important. It's the reason why we double tap on Instagram, right? We like and love on Facebook because we know that the connectivity is massively important. But we also understand that the awareness of opportunities pre-release and post-release typically aren't there. The access isn't there. I've been in the game now, you know, launched Flikshop for almost 8 years now, and I'm just now learning that there are people who really want to help and support people in these sales. And as I learn about what some of these corporate companies want to do, these ESG departments and the corporate impact strategies that are starting to roll out around the social impact inside these spaces, I'm starting to see that there is a possibility for some kind of reconciliation around how we thought about justice and how we thought about corrections. And I am optimistic about it. Today, it doesn't point towards success in that space because we just still racking up the bodies, which means we're racking up the numbers, which means that we're padding people's pockets. And until we figure out ways to be able to have demonstrable ways to do that, to eradicate that, I think that, you know, we're going to be in trouble. But again, I'm optimistic because I do see that conversations like these are happening, and it started happening a bit more and more prevalent. Criminal justice reform is now sexy now, right? When we first launched, this was like a foreign, you know, people was like, throw away the key, lock them up, throw away the key. I think that's starting to change. And so I'm hoping that my son won't have to live in the same world that I had to live in, where he lives in a neighborhood where police activity is enforced, where in other neighborhoods, police actually serve. So we'll see what happens in years to come.
No, that's a really great point, and I appreciate you laying that out. And it's so interesting that you say you're optimistic. You know, James Baldwin once said that I have no choice as a Black man to be optimistic, because otherwise it means I've given up. And so you're right. We have to continue to be optimistic, despite when all the circumstances around us might show us otherwise. And you brought up a great point. You know, let's be honest. We know a lot of reasons why business leaders don't get engaged in criminal justice reform, doesn't get engaged in issues related to human rights violations, especially when you think about the police, is that it is $1 billion industry. Someone is making money off the fact that there are real people with real stories, with real families from real communities who are locked up behind bars. And so I would love for us to spend some time talking about the fact that, you know, we're here asking business leaders to get engaged, while at the same time reconciling with the fact that that now prison is $1 billion industry. What is the role that business leaders can play? How can they get involved in an authentic way? And should they also make sure that the recommendations they put forth publicly are reflective of their internal investment as well? And I would love to start with Michelle.
So yeah, I'm a perfect person to start with, since we are a business that has been utilizing inmate labor for 25 years. There can be a lot of criticism of that by a lot of people. However, we have used it as a force for good since the very beginning, by compensating the women fairly for the work that they are doing, and providing them the training that gets them into a real career when they get out, and then giving them those opportunities for that career, as well as all of the support necessary to be successful. And so when we think about, well, what can other businesses do? Because there are businesses that are, exploiting this as well. And so businesses, one, if you have inmate labor in some form or fashion in your supply chain, you need to investigate it, and you need to make sure that it is a business that's doing good. If you are a business that is a supplier and you have manufacturing products that are going into these institutions, because there are tons of products that are being bought by folks who are incarcerated. And so companies need to examine how are they treating this piece of their supply chain? Like what exactly is happening? Are you exploiting the inmates, or their families, or are you providing them a service that can make their life better, like Marcus is, right? He's providing something that is actually beneficial, and it makes the experience better for everybody involved. So those are some of those basic things. And then on a broader scale, businesses need to look at how, it's the same thing I said before, how can they get involved in either, providing or supporting programs that are providing training and educational opportunities to people who are incarcerated. How are they, look at how they're making outsourcing decisions. Who are they outsourcing to? How can they utilize that as an opportunity to provide jobs and training and opportunities for people? And then again, to how are they hiring? So they can partner with, there's lots of companies like the Televerde Foundation or Televerde or the Last Mile or the Next Chapter. There's a lot of organizations that are getting involved in how we upskill and prepare and support people to rejoin the communities. And businesses can get involved either through donating their time, their talent, their treasures, their products, their people, right? Businesses have more resources than anybody else, and the organizations that are working in this space can benefit from those resources in ways to help make it better for everyone.
Thank you for that. And you're right, like they have so much more, oftentimes are able to be heard from a more serious perspective by the government because of the economic implications that they provide. Ash?
The prison industrial complex wouldn't be possible without the industrial part. Thousands of US businesses participate in the exploitation of individuals in the prison system. I mean, they're publicly traded in household names like Sherwin-Williams, so many other brands that we use, Black & Decker, all these organizations. And these corporations have monetized crime and punishment. $80 billion in tax, and our taxes, our money goes to this system. And instead of being ashamed of it, they're fighting for those dollars. Those companies are fighting for those tens of billions of dollars that are funneled into the private sector via vendor contracts and healthcare providers and food supplies. To give you a bit of context, $8 billion, the private prison industry is worth $8 billion or something like just around that amount. The food supply contract with the prison industry is worth $8 billion. So there's more ways of making money than private prisons. And there's 4,100 companies involved. Look, I'm asking businesses and business leaders watching this, look, historically, I get it. Businesses are not interested in permanent and effective stands for racial justice and criminal justice. They don't want to offend some customers. They don't want some profit slipping through their fingers. But these protests are not going away. And I'm with Jamira. I want to burn the system down, right? I mean, the reality is it is literally oppressing a whole race of people. And, we are not just calling on our local police departments and prisons and government officials to account right now. We are holding companies to account. So now is not the time to weigh economic risk or passing or profit margins. It's time for businesses across America to act, because we will look back right now at these actions in this moment and see how serious you were about justice as well. How quickly we will discover really quickly what side of history you were on, like we did with apartheid South Africa. If you did not leave, you would be protested. It was by students, it was about people, it was about shareholders, it was employees. And let's also put this in context. While COVID's still going on, people are at home and there are no distractions. I think Malcolm X once said that sports was the distraction to Black liberation. I think it was a quote that they used in the Nation of Islam. Now, there is no, attending sports. I know some stuff's come back. There is no offices. There is no thing. People can see everything happening in front of them. And I saw a question pop up in the chat that said, are media telling the right story? They're not telling the right story, but because of this and because of social media, Black people are telling their story. And everyone is listening. So without any change, any of your claims of solidarity with communities of colors are for naught. And this is your moment to actually be on the right side of history.
That's such a great point. I want to say when I first started getting social justice, it was the cute thing to do, right? It was the idea that businesses they're nicely using their resources, nicely writing big checks, that went nowhere. But really, when we think about where this country, where this world is actually the economic thing to do. It is the sustainable thing to do. Because when we think about young people, particularly millennials and Gen Z, the data is there. Where they're investing their money, where they want to work, who are the companies they're holding accountable, are all based on where the company sits in their social responsibility, particularly where they stand on human rights violations. And so if organizations, companies are thinking about surviving in the next 10, 20, 30 years, it's really about how do you make strategic efforts to ensure that you are helping communities grow versus just sucking resources and opportunities from them. And when we think about mass incarceration, we're looking at literally generational implications on the sucking of resources from those spaces. I would love to turn to you, Katherine, because again, you know, we know that young people are leading the charge, right? Even beyond bars and outside of it, they're doing it because they have oftentimes no, you know, they don't fuck with the shits, right? They don't care about the BS. They don't believe in public statements for the sake of public statements. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, working with young people, where are they seeing the role and responsibility of businesses to, you know, take a step further and do the work that's required, even if you lose short-term gains, but long-term, you actually help to benefit the larger community?
Thank you so much, Jamira. And you know, this question is very, very personal to me, because I have the privilege in my role at the Campaign for the Fair Citizen of Youth of working with Anna in strategic partnerships. And one thing that she always ensures is that directly impacted people have a voice at the table. When we are with our corporate partners discussing their fair chance hiring policies and either creating them or improving them, there's always someone that is directly impacted, that has been through the system themselves, that's there to share their stories and how it's impacted them, and also being able to give them the statistics on what are the benefits of hiring directly impacted people, which research shows there's lower absenteeism, high levels of interest in being trained and learning new skills. Like, this is an amazing group of people, but unless they're proximate to the issue, unless they allow directly impacted people to sit at the table, unless they're open to listening at a narrative that's contrary to what has been in place for generations, true change and the social justice and criminal justice reform is not going to happen. But that's what is needed right now. There has to be, like, where you're putting the foot to the pedal and you're being serious about really being inclusive and being diverse and being a part of this change and being on the right side of history this go around.
And Marcus, I mean, you created a company that in many ways sits at the intersection, right, of like trying to provide a quality service at an amazing cost for those who are trying to connect with family members, share moments and memories, because we know those who are behind bars, oftentimes they feel like their life has frozen in place while the rest of the world is moving around them. I'm curious, from your perspective, you know, what should business leaders be doing differently, even if they're providing a service that is of quality for those impacted communities, while also making sure that they're speaking outwardly regarding these issues?
I mean, listen, we all want stronger families. We all want safer communities, and better outcomes, right? But what I will say is, like, we don't have to do a lot of examination around this. Like, just stop wondering why your technology or your marketing ideas or your hiring records, why all of these things are stale. They're stale right now. And we're all asking questions around, like, how do we improve this? And you got to realize that, like Ashish said, you're losing to a culture that is evolving and becoming more empathetic by the day. Innovation only happens at that intersection of risk and hidden opportunities. So people who are working in this space, who have lived in these cells, they've resided at the intersection their entire lives. And they can't wait to help your company grow or your organization to be able to build in their marketing efforts. I mean, most of the products that I see on my timeline are designed strictly for me and my friends. And most of them can all say, like you say, like 12 of your 13 brothers was in jail, right? So if you don't know where to get started, you don't have to look far. Like, I want to help you. I will help you. I want to help you in your departments grow. Katherine and their organizations, they're willing to sit down with you and walk through you with your anti-racist policies, your hiring policies. Like these are ways, demonstrable ways that you can show not only the companies that are going to be, the customers that are going to be doing research about your business and whether or not they should be doing business with you, but your team members, like your teams, they come to work every day and they have the same families that I have, and they want to see that the companies that they're working at, they care about them in an important way, and it doesn't stop at compensation.
Oh man, that's such a great point. I feel like companies think that their employees are somehow separate from the society in which we all have to operate in, as if they don't go back to communities that are often faced with these very real problems, right? As if someone in their company didn't feel impacted when George Floyd died, or didn't feel impacted when Breonna Taylor died, or doesn't have relatives who are incarcerated. When you say, Ash, in the very beginning, that we're talking about 20% of the world's prison population, I guarantee you the vast majority of the attendees on this call probably know at least one person who has been incarcerated. So you can't separate people that work for you and the people in the communities from each other. Ali, before we go to the last question, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to the point of exploiting mass incarceration, the fact that it's big business. And I just want to conclude by saying that's what we got to do. Exploitation of people incarcerated is big business. Ash pointed out all the stats. We need to change that and go beyond prison reform looking sexy, but turn that into big business. I think if we start doing that, then some of these people will probably wake up and really start investing and want to get involved.
A really great point. Okay, so I'm all about marching orders. I'm all about giving people something to do with their lives, with their money, because many of the folks on this call might have the ability to hold purse strings at their company, might be the person that creates the internal values and external values that organizations fight for. What is one piece of advice that you would give to those who are listening, who are watching, to help them better understand why this issue is so important and why they should not hesitate to get involved now if they hope to survive in the future? And we'll start with you, Ash.
Look, one bit of advice is really hard on this topic, as you know. Look, if you're a business on this call, what Michelle said earlier on, look at your supply chain, right? So end your relationship at any level with the criminal justice system. I am talking to everyone, marketers, all that jazz, right? Do not promote the cops and their recruitment campaign. Do not use prison industrial labor. Do not work on government contracts with Homeland Security and ICE. Do not work to make profit. It's people over profit, freedom over fear. And right now, every dollar you take on that supports the oppression of your brothers and sisters in America.
Thank you, Michelle.
I agree with Ashish. Businesses have to look at what is the impact that they're having on the world around them. We make every day, as consumers and as businesses, we make decisions in the way that we spend our money. And we have to evaluate that and look at every spot on how we can use our business as a force for good, and use the way that we spend our money, invest our resources, what we do with our corporate social responsibility dollars, and spend it in a way that has a positive impact that will drive long-lasting change for this population. Because when we can create change for in this space, then it actually not only does it change the lives of the person involved, but it changes it for their families, it changes it for their communities. It gives people the opportunity to participate in our economy. It provides prosperity for all, which ultimately creates a better economy and better communities for all of us.
Awesome. Katherine?
My advice would be to hire. Directly impacted people, formerly incarcerated people are a key and untapped demographic of the labor market. And I don't want you to take my word for it. Meet us, get proximate to us. We have a whole organization, the Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network, of amazing leaders in the movement that were formerly incarcerated as children, did 30 plus years and came home. Come to webinars like this and meet directly impacted people who came out and just hit the ground running, and just see how awesome we are. Get proximate to us and take the chance, do the leap, just do it. Just do it. Don't hesitate. Just get involved, take action.
Exactly. Don't just talk about it, be about it. Marcus?
Yeah, I'm doubling down on Katherine with the hiring. Like I applied for 41 jobs when I came home. The 42nd gave me a job when their application said, have you ever been convicted of a felony, comma, within the last 7 years. I had just served 8 years, so I could honestly say, no, I hadn't been convicted of a felony within the last 7 years, and they gave me a job. That was the opportunity that I needed in order to be able to propel the rest of my life. So I'm doubling down on Katherine for one. And I know you said one, but I got to do my own because I'm doubling down on Katherine's. But I also think what is also important is to have these types of real conversations and events with your entire teams to allow them the opportunity to learn and understand ways that they can practice empathy and invite people like myself or Katherine to those conversations that lead them up so that we can help educate. And I think that that's going to be one of the most empowering things you can do for your organization.
Awesome. Ali?
Yeah, I think I just want to double down on the points Katherine and Marcus made, because hiring and employability is a big factor in all of this stuff. But something that Ash said earlier on in the panel, and obviously I agree with everybody on the panel, but just one advice is be on the right side of history. You see what's going on in the world. You see what's going on globally. You see what's happening in America. And as a business, I feel like it's your duty to be on the right side of history. So let's get on board and be on the right side of history. That's the biggest and the most important advice I think I could give.
Exactly. I'm a firm believer that what comes with collective impact, if we're really thinking about doing this work, we need all hands on deck because we have collective responsibility to each other to cultivate and create the world we need. I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their time, sharing their stories, being blatantly honest with the audience. There's a lot of work moving forward, but I hope we provided enough information to give you marching orders for how we can continue the conversation moving forward. Thank you for having me.